Our movie begins in one of the working-class neighborhoods in China with a scientist and inventor named Qi, who is working on a new formula designed to heal any skin deformity on the human body. He's doing this because both he and his daughter, Wei, were born with a very large birthmark on their faces, a mark that looks disturbing and frightening to them and makes people disgusted to interact with them. That's why he and Wei have lived in isolation from everyone after suffering constant bullying their whole lives. While he's working, Qi notices his daughter sitting quietly and drawing. What catches his attention is that she's drawing a very rare flower, so he asks her where she saw it. She tells him she saw it in his notebook. It turns out Qi wants to use the liquid inside that flower in his experiments because he learned that this liquid contains a substance capable of healing the deformity that he and his daughter suffer from. This flower is known as the corpse flower because it contains a sticky fluid with a terrible smell caused by insects feeding on it, since it's an important food source for them. Wei asks him if he can really fix her face and make her look good in front of people. Qi promises her that he won't just fix his own face, he'll fix hers too. After that, he leaves her and returns to his experiment, and we see that he starts testing on animal skin and bodies first to make sure the results won't be harmful. His lab is a filthy place filled with organs and limbs cut from different kinds of animals for testing. Qi tries the latest formula he managed to create, and it finally gives him the result he's been hoping for, something he clearly notices on the tissue of the animal he tested it on. So Qi finally decides to gather his courage and test the formula on his own face. He's extremely nervous and scared it might fail because animal tissue is completely different from human tissue. Qi applies the formula to his deformed face, and the moment the components seep into his skin, the birthmark slowly begins to disappear. Qi stares at the mirror in complete shock, unable to believe that people will finally respect him because he can fix the way he looks. But seconds later, he's horrified to realize something far worse than the deformity is waiting for him. The formula keeps spreading across his entire face and starts closing every cavity on it. Qi rushes to his research papers, hoping to find a solution, but time is running out. He can't make it, and the substance seals every opening on his face, his eyes, his mouth, and his nose, leaving him completely unable to breathe. With no other option, Qi tries to cut an opening in his mouth so he can breathe. He grabs a scalpel and cuts himself forcefully, but the hole seals again instantly, and his entire face becomes a single solid piece. He tries again, but nothing changes. All of this happens while Wei watches in shock and horror, unable to help her father. She grabs the scalpel and desperately tries to make any kind of opening for him to breathe through, but every cut seals up even faster. She keeps trying until Qi finally loses his life from the massive blood loss. After that, Wei continues to suffer from bullying from everyone around her, but she forces herself to ignore it until the time comes for her to take revenge on all of them. Years pass, and Wei reaches university age. She receives a scholarship to study science in America, thanks to her outstanding grades, and she has to live with her aunt Ling, who lives in the US, with her daughter Angela. The moment Ling sees Wei, she's overjoyed because she hasn't seen her in years. Ling is a very kind, warm-hearted woman, nothing like the people who bullied Wei all her life. While they're on their way home, Ling keeps talking to Wei about her husband who abandoned her and Angela years ago, and about her daughter Angela, who's always out with her friends and barely spends time at home. Ling tries to get closer to Wei and sees her as the role model she wishes Angela could be, because Angela keeps failing her classes and hates studying. Wei tries to cover the deformed part of her face with a scarf or shawl the whole time so no one in America notices it, hates her, or bullies her the way they did back in China. When they finally arrive home, Ling calls Angela and asks her to greet Wei, but it becomes clear that Angela doesn't like her presence at all and speaks to her in a rude tone. Angela tells her that Becky, her dog, doesn't like strangers in the house, and she also snaps that Wei needs to speak a language she can understand because she doesn't know Chinese. She was born in America and grew up around English speakers. Wei calmly tells her she has no problem with that and that she already speaks English, so she won't use Chinese with her again. Right then, Ling turns the conversation on Angela and starts comparing her to Wei, who can speak 2 languages fluently, while Angela can barely speak 1. Angela gets annoyed at her mom's comment, but tries not to show it. The next day, Ling sends Angela to call Wei for breakfast. While they're standing together, Angela gets a phone call. She immediately rushes to her room to answer it. Wei senses something strange and quietly follows her to eavesdrop. she finds Angela talking to her father, the same man Aunt Ling said had abandoned them. It turns out Angela has been speaking to him behind her mother's back, begging him to take her to live with him because she doesn't want to stay with her mom anymore. Suddenly, Angela hears Wei's footsteps by the door and panics, afraid Wei overheard everything. The next day, Wei heads out to go to the university. On her way, she meets a homeless man named John, who is also deformed and suffers from bullying just like she does. Wei feels sympathy for him and stops to talk to him. After that, she arrives at the university, where a young professor named Paul starts class by handing back the grades from their last exam. A girl named Eve scored 92% and is considered the top student, until Wei's paper shows she got a perfect 100% thanks to her intelligence and hard work. This makes Eve jealous, especially since she's one of Angela's closest friends, along with another student named Jasmine. During the lecture, Paul tells the students he needs assistance in his lab and assures them it will give them valuable experience they'll need after graduation, as well as extra points to strengthen their resumes. But none of the students seem excited, except for Wei. After the class ends, she sneaks into the lab, watching everything with fascination. She starts going through Paul's research and discovers he's working on the exact same medical problem her father dedicated his life to solving. While she's looking, Paul enters the lab and finds her holding her father's notebook. He asks her to show it to him. As soon as he reads it, he realizes her father had reached discoveries he himself hasn't achieved yet. He understands that Wei inherited her father's work, that she enrolled in the science program to continue his research, and that she intends to finish what he couldn't. He tells her he'll allow her to use the materials and equipment in the lab to advance the experiment, but only on one condition, that she becomes his assistant because he's impressed by her intelligence and passion. Wei agrees without hesitation. After university, Angela returns home with Eve and Jasmine. They go into Wei's room before she gets back, and Angela keeps talking about her in a nasty, hateful way. She also tells them that Wei uses the scarf she wears to hide the birthmark on her face. Then they open one of Wei's drawers out of pure nosiness and are shocked to find a scalpel inside, which immediately makes them uneasy. After that, they go downstairs to watch a movie and hang out together. As soon as Wei comes home, all three of them scream at once, which embarrasses her deeply and hurts her feelings. She sits next to them on the couch and starts eating, since she's been out working all day, but the way she eats looks disgusting to them. The three girls get grossed out and leave her alone, which makes her even more embarrassed. The next morning, Paul receives a message from the organization funding his research, telling him that if he doesn't submit the final results within exactly 2 weeks, they'll have to drop him. Paul panics, and the only solution he finds is to use Chi's research, Wei's father's work, to finish what he still hasn't managed to complete. After university, Wei meets Angela, Eve, and Jasmine in the park where they were hanging out together. They're immediately annoyed when they see her because they never invited her to join them. Wei tells them she wants to treat them to the Asian food her father used to love. They agree to try it, and Wei takes them to an Asian restaurant and orders the dishes she told them about. But when the three girls see how the food looks, they find it disgusting and refuse to eat any of it. Wei decides to eat alone and starts devouring the food aggressively and in an irritating way until all three of them get grossed out and leave her. The next day, Wei is walking alone in the street, deeply sad and feeling rejected by everyone around her. As she walks, John, the homeless man, calls out to her and asks what's bothering her. She tells him that everyone sees her as ugly and keeps asking whether she burned herself to end up looking like this. She also tells him that before her mother died, she said their ancestors committed a terrible sin in the past, and Wei is the one paying the price for it. John tells her the world is cruel and ugly, so she replies that she could make it beautiful, if only she had the chance. While they're talking, Paul calls out to her and asks her to get in his car so he can drive her home. During the ride, he tells her he wants to combine both of their knowledge and work on the research together so they can reach results that are faster and more reliable. He tells her they'll start working that way the next day in the university lab. Wei agrees to his offer and feels he will help her a lot. When she gets home, she looks at her father's picture with excitement and promises him she will make him proud. At that moment, Wei hears a noise coming from Angela's room, so she goes to look through the crack in the door. She's shocked to see a guy with her. His name is Josh. Wei is stunned by what her cousin is doing in the house and how she takes advantage of her mother's absence to do whatever she wants. Suddenly, Angela senses Wei's presence and panics, immediately telling Josh to leave. Angela then walks up to Wei and tells her she doesn't want to see her face or even hear her voice ever again. Wei is shocked by Angela's cruelty and goes to her room, crying because everyone hates her for something she has no control over. The next day, she goes to the university and spends all her time in the lab with Paul so they can work on the experiment and finish it as fast as possible. They discover that Chi's experiment failed because it lacked an organic compound capable of binding skin tissue together. So they decide to search for that missing compound, and days pass while they work nonstop. Meanwhile, it becomes clear that Paul is secretly involved with Eve, Angela's friend, and he meets her after Wei leaves the lab. One day, Wei is surprised when Jasmine walks into the lab and asks Paul if she can join him and help with the research and experiments. Paul agrees and tells her to write her name down. Wei immediately gets upset and fears Jasmine is going to take her place with Paul. But it turns out Jasmine only joined the lab to be close to Wei. She feels guilty for the way she treated her before and wants to get closer and support her. Jasmine rides the bus home with Wei and keeps talking to her, apologizing for the way she behaved toward her in the past. She asks Wei to take off the scarf she uses to hide her birthmark, but Wei refuses because she's embarrassed for anyone to see her deformity. Jasmine gently removes the scarf herself and tells her she looks better this way. Wei is touched and starts crying. While they're sitting on the bus, Wei notices a picture on a magazine showing the corpse flower, the same one she saw in her father's notebook when she was little and used to draw it. She suddenly remembers that he once told her he planned to use the liquid inside it for his experiments. Wei decides to obtain the liquid and work on it, hoping it might be the organic compound needed for the experiment to finally succeed. At night, she sneaks into a large botanical garden, breaks the lock from the outside, and goes straight to the corpse flower, taking the part she needs. She brings it back to the lab and continues working on the experiment, writing down every observation so she doesn't forget anything, until she finally produces a fully integrated compound with all the elements and materials required. She decides to test the compound on her own body. But to avoid repeating what happened to her father, she chooses to test it on her leg first. She cuts a small piece of skin from her leg and applies the compound she created. To her surprise, the skin immediately begins to bind together, and she gets excited about the results she achieved. At that moment, Paul is with Eve in his office, and through the glass, he sees what Wei is doing. He panics, afraid she might harm herself, and rushes toward her. Wei shows him the successful outcome directly on her skin, and Eve seizes the moment. She snaps a picture of them together in that compromising situation and sends it to Angela to stir up trouble and upset Wei. After that, Eve walks into the lab and tells Wei she wants her to join them for their hangout tonight because she doesn't want to leave her alone with Paul. She takes her and leaves the lab with her. Meanwhile, the picture reaches Angela. She looks at it and tells Eve she'll handle the situation herself. She'll get rid of Wei in a way that will make things easier for all of them. Angela returns home with Josh, who wants to come inside as he usually does. But she refuses and tells him her mom is coming home tonight and can't see him there. Angela goes inside and complains to her mother, insisting she must do something about Wei. She wants to tell her about the photo of Wei and Paul, but her mother doesn't give her the chance. Ling defends Wei and tells Angela that whatever she did, it probably happened because she's still not used to life in America. Ling tells her that she is the problem, not Wei, and ends the call. This makes Angela furious and even more jealous of Wei. Meanwhile, Wei is with Eve, who takes her to a creepy, isolated spot, looks at her with disgust, and tells her she knows she's involved with Paul. Wei is shocked and keeps denying it, insisting she never did anything like that. But Eve makes it clear she doesn't believe her. She accuses Wei of letting the professor use her just so he can give her high grades, then leaves her and walks away. Wei becomes extremely anxious, terrified that Eve will ruin her reputation among their classmates. It's also revealed why Eve had the highest grades before Wei arrived. She was secretly involved with Paul, letting him use her however he wanted in exchange for good grades. Wei returns home devastated, only to find Angela crying as well. Angela screams at Wei, ordering her to pack her things and leave the house because she's ruining her life. A fierce fight breaks out between them, each one trying to protect herself from the other. During the struggle, Angela attacks Wei with hatred and rage, pressing her hands around Wei's neck and choking her, fully intending to kill her. Panicking, Wei tries to defend herself with anything she can reach. She finds one of the Asian chopsticks beside her, grabs it, and forcefully drives it into Angela's eye to make her let go. But she's horrified to realize that Angela has died because of what she did. At that moment, Ling is on her way home, and Wei has no idea what to do with the body. Suddenly, she gets a sinister idea. She drags Angela's corpse to the bathroom, puts her in the bathtub, and talks to her body, telling Angela not to worry and promising that she'll fix everything. It becomes clear that Wei has decided to rely on the formula she created in the university lab. In a gruesome and brutal way, she removes Angela's facial skin and attaches it to her own, merging it with her skin using the compound. This gives her Angela's features, and she decides to live her life in Angela's place. She feels she has gained two advantages from this. First, she can finally hide the birthmark that ruined her life. And second, Ling will never suspect Angela's disappearance because Wei will be living as her. Wei picks up her father's picture and tells him she has finally achieved the dream he spent years working on. She hides Angela's corpse under her bed so no one can find it, but Becky the dog keeps sniffing around it and getting closer to it every now and then. Ling finally arrives home and enters Angela's room, where Wei is now pretending to be Angela because she looks exactly like her. Ling doesn't notice anything wrong. She hugs her daughter, apologizes for yelling at her on the phone, and promises that everything will be okay. Wei is deeply affected, but also extremely nervous and terrified that her secret could be exposed at any moment. Wei spends hours watching Angela's videos, studying her tone of voice, her laugh, and even her walk, so no one can notice any difference. Whenever she learns that Ling will be traveling for work, she feels relieved because it means less pressure and less fear of being discovered. Wei goes to the university in Angela's appearance, trying to act as confident as possible so no one suspects anything. While she's walking down the hallway, Josh, Angela's boyfriend, approaches her and tells her he wants to meet her today. She agrees without hesitation. Wei is thrilled by the admiring looks she receives from her classmates, something she feels for the very first time in her life after spending all her years under bullying and humiliation. Wei's confidence starts growing because of the love and support she receives from Angela's friends. After university, Josh meets her and brings her flowers. Wei is overjoyed, and the two of them go spend time together on top of a high cliff in nature. While they're sitting together, Angela's face begins to peel off from Wei's real skin, and the detached skin falls right onto Josh's face. He panics in terror and tries to pull away from her, but he accidentally slips off the cliff, and his life ends instantly. Wei looks down at his body from above, deeply shaken and overwhelmed with guilt. She goes back home determined to find a way to secure Angela's skin more firmly, but she's suddenly shocked to discover that her notebook is missing. She searches everywhere but can't find it. Then Paul appears, holding the notebook that contains all of Wei's notes, as well as her father's, about the experiment they were working on. It becomes clear he stole it so he could take all the credit for their work. Wei eventually manages to reattach Angela's skin to her face again, but only temporarily. She returns to the lab hoping she might have forgotten the notebook there on her last visit, but she doesn't find it. She calls Paul and asks him about it, only for him to stun her by admitting he has it right now. From the way he talks, she realizes he has no intention of giving it back. She breaks down in anger and frustration. Suddenly, Eve catches her attention from outside the window, standing on the street. Wei goes down to her, approaches her car, and talks to her while pretending to be Angela. She asks Eve to give her a ride home. Eve quickly agrees, since she and Angela are close friends. During the entire ride, Wei keeps staring at Eve's beauty, her blonde hair, her striking features, her charm. It becomes clear that Wei has already decided on her next face, now that she realizes Angela's skin isn't a perfect match for her. Wei keeps meeting Eve over the next several days, watching every detail of her behavior in different situations so she can copy it later. After a few days, Wei brings Eve to Angela's house to carry out her plan, because Angela's skin has reached its worst stage on her face and needs to be replaced as soon as possible. As soon as they arrive, Eve gets an uneasy feeling and wants to leave, sensing something is wrong for no clear reason. But Wei refuses to let her go and asks her to come upstairs to her room, saying she bought something new and wants to show it to her. Eve follows her without suspecting anything. The moment they step inside the room, Wei pulls out a power drill, intending to kill her with it. Eve screams and starts running everywhere in terror, trying to escape. Wei quickly cuts the power, so there's no light, and Eve can't find her way out. Eve rushes toward the backyard and finds the pool in front of her, so she jumps in to hide underwater. But it turns out to be a terrible choice, because Wei senses her breathing from beneath the surface. She grabs her by the hair, drives the drill into her skull, and keeps it running until part of Eve's brain spills out of her head. Wei then drags Eve's body to the bathroom, puts her in the bathtub, and begins doing to her exactly what she did to Angela. While she's working, their neighbor Cheryl knocks on the door. Wei opens it, trying her best to hide her face. Cheryl complains that their dog hasn't stopped barking all night, and she hasn't been able to sleep. She threatens to call the police and file a noise report if the dog doesn't stop, and then leaves. Wei finally manages to attach Eve's face onto her own skin, relieved that she now has a chance to get closer to Paul while pretending to be Eve. Wei promises her father that she will get his notebook back and make Paul pay for what he did. She keeps watching Eve's videos on her phone and on social media so she can memorize her gestures and perfectly imitate her new identity. The next morning, 2 police officers arrive at Angela's house, wanting to speak with her regarding the disappearance of her boyfriend, Josh. But Wei, now acting as Eve, tells them that Angela isn't home at the moment. The officers insist on searching the house, so Wei lets them go upstairs while she hides in the bathroom, preparing for the worst. Fortunately, the police leave without discovering the bodies she has hidden. After that, Wei goes to the university, where all the students recognize her as Eve, and no one suspects anything. Suddenly, Jasmine approaches her nervously, telling her that Angela hasn't been answering her calls and hasn't shown up to class for a while. Wei panics and tells her Angela is probably sick or has some excuse keeping her away. But Jasmine isn't convinced. She suspects Angela might know something about Josh's disappearance and is hiding because she's scared. Wei grows even more anxious and snaps at Jasmine, speaking harshly and ordering her to stay out of other people's lives before walking away. Later, she goes to meet Paul wearing the same dress Eve had bought, hoping to seduce him, get as close to him as possible, achieve her goals through him, and retrieve her father's notebook. Back at home, the bodies of Angela and Eve become a source of constant stress and fear for Wei. She decides to cut them into smaller pieces to hide them more easily and uses an extremely sharp saw to carry out what she intends to do. While Wei is cutting the bodies, Becky smells the blood and starts barking loudly and nonstop. This annoys Cheryl, Angela's neighbor, for the second time, so she approaches the house to complain again about the dog. Wei appears to her in Eve's form and tells her she's Angela's friend and that Angela isn't home right now. Her appearance is terrifying, with a sinister look covering every part of her face, which frightens Cheryl and makes her leave immediately. Wei goes back inside and gives Becky one of the severed arms to eat so he'll quiet down. The next day, she goes to see Paul and tries to talk to him, but he surprises her by saying he had a problem at work and resigned. He's in a horrible mood and tells her to leave him alone. Paul then pours all his energy into working on the formula until he finally discovers the compound that binds skin cells and tissue together. He's overjoyed by what he's achieved. Meanwhile, Wei, still living as Eve, is at Angela's house when Paul contacts her to tell her the experiment finally succeeded and invites her over to celebrate. Wei decides she won't leave his house without taking the final formula. She arrives and finds him ecstatic and acting erratically. Since he's not paying attention, she steals the container with the formula. Suddenly, she feels Eve's face starting to detach from her skin. She tells Paul she has a headache and leaves before he notices. The moment she leaves, Paul searches for the formula and is shocked to find it missing. Furious, he immediately realizes she stole it. At the same time, Wei is falling apart, watching Eve's face slide off her own, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly, while she's crying, she is shocked to find Jasmine entering the kitchen. She came to visit Angela to check on her since she hasn't been answering calls. But Angela isn't there, and no one is in the house except Wei, who is now exposed in her true form after Eve's face has fallen apart. Jasmine, in her kindness, tries to comfort Wei. She tells her she doesn't like seeing her sad and that she doesn't want to leave her alone. She decides to spend some time with her to cheer her up. Jasmine opens the fridge to prepare something for them to eat and is horrified by the worst sight of her life, the chopped remains of Angela and Eve inside. Before she can react, Wei wraps kitchen plastic around Jasmine's head and suffocates her until she dies. Moments later, Paul arrives at Angela's house and confronts Wei, convinced she has the formula. She admits she does and tells him it's in the fridge. Paul opens it and is horrified by the dismembered bodies. Wei appears behind him and injects him with a sedative. When he wakes up, he finds she has cut a large portion of skin from his neck. He screams in agony. Wei tells him she wants to test the formula on his body and injects the exposed tissue with the compound to see what will happen. Paul begins to suffer the exact same fate as Chi because he unknowingly recreated the final compound Chi used before he died. Wei dances around him as she watches him suffer. Suddenly, she realizes the police are on their way. She grabs the formula and runs outside, heading straight to John, the homeless man, begging him to hide her under his blanket. But while running, she drops the bottle. The compound spills onto her skin. When John covers her with the blanket to hide her from police, the formula touches him too. Something horrifying happens. Wei's skin merges with John's until their bodies fuse into one grotesque form, forcing them both to live like that forever. Wei faces this horrific fate because she tried to alter the appearance God created for her and refused to accept her destiny. The movie ends.